Welcome to Bridging of Ages. My name is Dan Mendelevitz. Today, we are going to be talking about challenging ageist stereotypes. Very important. We've talked a lot on previous episodes about various points of this, and today we want to bring it together and remind people about their conscious and unconscious biases and take a look at the ageist stereotypes that we may or may not be aware of. So let's look at what ageism means. So it's a discrimination, it's a prejudice, it's a stereotyping based on age. And a lot of people think of it just as doing this with people who are older, but it's also very important to remember that this is also something that we do with people who are younger. So it's all ages. We all age, and we all look at people and sometimes put them into categories because it's easier. And it can be explicit or it can be actually very subtle. And it tends to be targeted. We target older people and say certain things about them, or younger people, or sometimes even in between. And it can lead to limitations and opportunities and participation. And it can just systematically disadvantage individuals as we go through this. And what it is we're looking at somebody as the number that the age that they are, as opposed to what they have to offer. So it's important to understand that. So let's take a look at some of the stereotypes. If you look at older adults, we tend to think about, well, they're getting a bit frail, maybe there's a cognitive decline, there could be resistance to change. These are all stereotypes that we have about older workers and older people in general. Although, if you think about it, they've changed so many times on the way to becoming more experienced and a little bit older. And when we look at our younger individuals, we say, oh, they're in. Let's look at stereotypes. We have stereotypes about older adults and we have stereotypes about younger individuals. So think about it. What are some of the typical ones that we think about when we talk about older adults? Are they frail? Is there a cognitive decline? Is there resistance to change? And we think about these things because we put people in what age they are as opposed to what their experience are. Even though a lot of folks don't have any of these, we automatically, when we're looking at the stereotypes, put older adults into these categories. We also have stereotypes for younger individuals: inexperienced, irresponsible, lacking commitment, not even wanting to work. These are all things that have been going on forever. You know, if you look, even Plato writes about Socrates complaining about the youth way back in ancient Greece. So it goes on for every generation. And if you look at it for both, you know, for older adults, these stereotypes can lead to various exclusion from decision making, reduced opportunities in the workplace, not even having a chance to get back into the workplace. For younger people, such views can result in limiting their career, their advancement. They get overlooked for leadership roles. They're not even let in the door many times. So it's important to look at what these stereotypes mean and what they do, because if we think about it, a lot of times they're unconscious. We don't even realize we're doing them because, once again, we are putting people into categories because of a number on their age and what year they were born. And it's important to resist those and to uncover them and to understand that we all have them. I study this and teach about ageism all the time. And I have to catch myself sometimes falling into stereotypes when I look at people with different ages. So it can happen to all of us. And the awareness is very important. So, how does this manifest? Everyday interactions, how we talk to somebody, the patience we may not have with somebody who has a different level of experience. There might be workplace policies. We might exclude people who are getting older. We might not give opportunities to people who are younger. Healthcare decisions. Oh, you're just older and that's just going to happen. So I'm not going to look into what the underlying problem is. Happens all the time in medicine. The media portrayals, these stereotypes, you see them sometimes in sitcoms, you see them in media with different commercials, you see them on TikTok videos, you see them everywhere like that. Very dismissive language. Oh, they're just old, or they're too young to know anything. And this leads exclusion, gets built into the process. So we start building up these structural barriers, and it manifests itself in exclusion, ageism, and not allowing a person's actual brain power to break through. And as you've heard me say before, I hate the waste of brain power because I believe everybody has something to offer. And that interplay makes a big difference. So why does it matter? The World Health Organization did a study and found out this is a very pervasive social issue. It's worldwide. Now we notice it here, I'm in the States, and I notice it even more so here because we're a very youth-oriented culture. But I think that also puts down young people as much as holds down older people. But something to think about. Our birth rates are lower, our demographics are changing. If we don't look at underlying problems, it can affect the health, economic security. What if you get to age 45 or 50 and you can't find work anymore? What if you're a young person trying to get into the workforce and they say, well, you're inexperienced, I'm not going to let you in? And we see that especially nowadays with AI, where they're replacing a lot of entry-level tasks, and the people who need to learn those things because they are your future. 10 years from now, they won't know how to do it because you didn't give them the opportunity to grow in that place. So we need to do a social inclusion instead of a social exclusion. And overall, it just reduces the productivity and the innovation that's going to happen. So how do we recognize ageism in everyday life? Look at the language. Look at the media cues. What about subtle jokes? I hear them all the time. I hear old people jokes. I hear young people jokes. And then that normalizes it. It normalizes a bias against younger people, and it normalizes biases against older people. And then when we get into the workplace, we just start making assumptions. Well, he's an older worker, he'll never figure out the tech. And the younger voices really aren't important because they're inexperienced. They got nothing to offer. And they're lazy. And all those things that we throw out there, which are totally absurd. Now, there may be individuals who have those traits, but to paint a wide brush over an entire group because of a couple individuals is really not what we're looking for. I have found, for instance, older adults are working with AI, they're understanding tech, they're teaching tech to younger people and to each other. So to make this broad idea that they're tech averse is not correct. Think about it this way. I and others have seen things that have worked and haven't worked. And perhaps from our experience, we can say, yeah, I'm not tech averse. I just know that particular thing's not going to work. Younger voices, looking at things from the beginner mind, looking at things with fresh eyes, with the energy, is extremely important. To say somebody is inexperienced, everybody's inexperienced with something. If you think about what it felt like the first time you did something, you probably failed at it. I know I did, because we could not understand it. We didn't even know the right questions to ask. So inexperience, to put a broad brush over somebody, is not productive. When are they going to learn? So social interactions. We live, especially in the States here, we're segregated by age a lot of times. So we're not doing those interactions. So there's some great groups going on right now that are starting to put young people and older people together. And they're finding that they have a lot in common and they can learn from each other. So we shouldn't talk over younger people. We shouldn't talk over older people. We shouldn't be over helping people, over helping somebody who you think has a problem without asking them. Perhaps they need the help, perhaps they don't. But to make these assumptions, remember, we're talking about our biases and our unconscious biases. So look at what do people really report? So there's many surveys that show that there's a lot of age-related slights in daily conversations and decisions. It's in the media, it's in our social media, it's in how we speak, it's in laughing at somebody who doesn't know your slang. It's in all of those things. So it's very important to understand that we are purposely excluding people by these slights and by not looking at different levels of experience and how we can interact and how we can learn from each other. I'd like to look at some of the historical roots of ageism. So in ancient times, you had the elders of the tribe, and they were respected and followed, and they carried the stories of the tribe. And then we move into more of the classical and medieval times, and elders were still respected, except we're starting to see in some of the writings, they're beginning to speak about their frailty. So we think about, we say, oh, people didn't live so long. Actually, a lot of people lived it older. We just had so much more death in childhood at that point that it makes the numbers skewed. There were plenty of older people and they had a lot to offer. And then it really begins to change when industrialization starts, because we prized youth for their strength. We had factories, things for physical work, and we even allowed, we had children in there working until our child labor laws came through. And they started to recast elders as less economically useful. And once their work life was over, a lot of them moved into poverty because there was no support. They didn't want to hear from them. And as we got more into modern times, we started to develop this very youth-based culture. And we started to divide our generations. People started to move apart. Before, a lot of times families and in homes, you'd have multiple generations living in the homes. And some people still do that. But it's become much rarer now. And we started to segregate our age groups. And young people are moving away, and people are having farther distances from their families, and they're not in this area, and we're discounting and not listening to what the elders had to offer. So those intergenerational ties started breaking down. But fortunately, now we're starting to reassess it. So in contemporary times, we're redefining work. People are living longer. We also have, if you looked at a previous post that we had here in one of our earlier podcasts, we talk about the demographic time bomb. So there's a lot less kids being born. In general, our population is aging. So we really need to look at it a different way. And as I've talked about many times before, it's important to build intergenerational teams. Why? Because they are more productive and they're more innovative, because we have an exchange of ideas. Not only that, they represent your customer base much better, or the people that your organization serves. So we're starting to re-energize our intergenerational interactions and our dialogues. And we're starting to see more value in the younger and the older workers. Now, that is not universal, and it's something that we really have to build on, because it's important to think about the fact that we can't discount younger workers and we can't discount older workers. We need to find a way to have both, not just to look at that number, which is an age. So let's talk about promoting intergenerational dialogue. How do we do that? So we really have to find forums to foster communication between age groups. We need to bring younger people into contact with older people and vice versa, because I think when you get them sitting down and actually talking together, and I've seen this and I've done this, it's amazing to watch. Both sides light up. Go, wow, I never knew that you had those experiences, or I never saw the fresh perspective that you just offered me. So I suggest, let's look for some shared activities. Mentorships, exchanges of ideas. Now, when you think about a mentorship, I know that any mentorship that I've been in order to be successful, both sides had to learn. So we have mentorships where an older person may mentor a younger person. And they have what they call now, there's a new term called reversed mentorship, which is really just another form of mentorship, where a younger person mentors an older person. But they're both extremely valid. And then we should probably start measuring our outcomes. I don't think we measure our outcomes. And there's different ways to do that. We can look at our productivity levels. We can look at how much innovation is rolling out of our teams. We can see better health outcomes, because now people who might have been isolated or only talked to people who are like them are now talking to people who are different and have different experience levels. And that is all very important. So what do we want to do for overcoming ageism? We've talked about we really have to start challenging our ageist stereotypes. Our biases, our unconscious biases, our casual comments, our jokes, all those things are relevant, because we don't want to put somebody down by their age. Remember, it's just a number. What's important is what's going on inside. It's quite important to think about that. What are we losing? Why are we wasting that brain power? So we've talked about overcoming various things that create ageism. We're really looking at challenging those stereotypes. And it's important to think about what comes next. So we're going to take a look going forward. We're going to look at some action items, and we're going to get some tips for today. And after a little video from our sponsor, we'll be back and talk about how we can move forward. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, welcome to Bridging of Ages. My name is Dan Mendelevitz. We've been talking about how to overcome our stereotypes with ageism. So let's look at some action items. The first action item is examine your biases. Are you ready to really look inside and see what biases, and to dig in to find those unconscious biases that you have when it comes to ageism? I suggest that you make a list. Just start writing them down. Do you do ageist jokes? Do you use it in your language? Do you not talk to people who are different than yourself? Do you stay isolated? Do you even know how to talk to? Do you have any interest in what people of different ages are also interested in? Are you open to learning? These are all really important. So examine your biases, write them down. However that works for you, put it in your phone, type it out, write it down. I like all of those. I like to be able to look at my list and really examine it. And then on the other side, start writing down how you can change those things. Come up with some ideas. Do a little brainstorming on yourself. It's not important that this be a perfect edited document. What's important is you're brainstorming out of your own head. You're really trying to get an idea of what is going to work for you. And the only way to know that is to know what your starting point is. So examine your own biases and figure out how you're going to move forward with those. But look at that list, because we all have that. As I've said, even though I teach this, I talk about it, I help others with it, I have to catch myself still when I find that I am still having those biases. They're very embedded, they're everywhere, and they're easy to just fall onto. So action item 2 is shared activities. Are you doing with things with people who are a different age group than you? Maybe you go find them. If you're younger, maybe you go talk to somebody in a senior center. If you're older, seek out ways to talk with younger people. You may volunteer in a school. You may just find other ways. In a work situation, are you only talking to your contemporaries? Or are you interacting with people who are younger than yourself or older than yourself? And are you just sitting and talking with them, or are you only doing work stuff? You know, when you have a cup of coffee at work and you're taking a little break, who do you sit with? Who do you talk with? These are all ideas for shared activities. I think you'll find what works for you, because it's going to be different for all of us. But what's really important is to seek out those shared activities. Now, if you take the information that you gathered in the action item 1, where you're examining your biases, you can look at that and say, where do I need work? What do I want to change? And you can look for shared activities that allow you to do that. All very good. This is important in your life outside of work, and it's important for your life inside work in an organization, wherever you are currently spending a lot of your time, looking for those shared activities. Action item 3. You've examined your biases, you're looking for shared activities. This hones in more in the workplace and places that you can look for to help others. So look for mentorship opportunities and exchanges. It may be something like Big Brother, Big Sister. It may be within your workplace. Maybe you've been there a while and you see a younger person who shows a lot of promise. Now, especially in large corporations, you don't rise to the top without a mentor. It just doesn't happen. It's the way the system works. And it's vitally important in smaller organizations too. If you have a small or medium-sized business, don't you want to bring those people up, whether they be older or younger? Don't you want to set up those conversations and interactions and exchanges? What you want to do is really set up some good mentorship programs that go two ways. So as we talked about before, you have the mentorships, you have the reverse mentorships. Of course, they're all styles of mentorship, where your long experienced workers have a chance to help the younger workers, and the younger workers have a chance to help the older workers and say, this is what I'm seeing walking in the door with fresh eyes. Vitally important. Because if you really think back to how it was when you first did something, you looked at it very differently than you do now that you have experience. And we all get into habits, and habits are hard to change. Mentorships and exchanges are a great way to find a way to change that. So after we have these actions, our action item 1 is examine your biases. Our action item 2 is shared activities. And our action item 3 is mentorships and exchanges. And now, if you need, you can always rerun this and take a look at it and go over those again. So here's the tip of the day. Measure your outcomes. What's changed? What's different? What's working? What isn't working? So if you can measure your outcomes from your action items, you have a better chance of understanding how that works. So remember, measure your outcomes. This has been Bridging of Ages. My name is Dan Mendelevitz. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can take a look and see what works for you. Invest in brain power, fuel brilliance.